Questions nobody asks. With a John Michael Swifter. What, was that bad?
So the argument is that A432 is a pitch standard that's way more aligned with nature, and that 440 is at best a fairly ill-considered number, and at worst it's actually really damaging to human beings and to society. And some people find this 432 concept to be, shall we say, uncannily resonant, and others think it's box of rocks stupid. And the trick is that you're walking a really fine line between science and subjectivity with this one, and it's not always a clear answer between one or the other. So what I'm going to talk about is some of what I understand and how I come at the problem, and then I'm going to talk about what I consider to be an unexpected conspiracy, which is in fact something both advocates for 440 and 432 are problematically complicit in. But first, let's talk about resonance. Vibration is defined as a periodic motion of the particles of an elastic body or medium in alternately opposite directions from the position of equilibrium when that equilibrium has been disturbed. If you want an illustration, just look at waves in the ocean, slinkies going like this, or swings you see at the playground. But in case you wonder, literally everything in the entire universe is vibrating all the time. We know because of the wave-particle duality that literally everything in existence is vibrating and has a wave nature to it at all times. Now, sometimes you can't see this wave nature, either because the vibrations are so small that they're not visible, or possibly because the thing itself is not visible, like it is itself a wave, or because it's matter that is constrained in some way. And this is also really called dampening. So if you think about like rocks in the side of a mountain, the rocks are technically vibrating, but they're all stuck together in a crystal lattice, so they can't really move very much. You can't see them vibrating, but they are. Now, another interesting phenomenon is called resonance, which is defined as a phenomenon when a vibrating system or external force drives another system to oscillate with greater amplitude at a specific preferential frequency. And what that basically means is that everything likes to vibrate at a certain frequency based on its own physics. And if something drives it at that frequency, the vibrations will get much, much bigger. Now, one way you can maybe understand this is if you look at microwaves. Like microwaves in a kitchen microwave will pass through certain things like microwave-safe cups. But things that they can resonate with, like fats that you put in the microwave, will get really, really, really hot and burn your Tupperware. They'll actually absorb the waves. And a more obvious way guitarists especially can understand that is like maybe when you play your E strings and then you mute your E strings, but you kind of hear one of the harmonics on your A string still resonating. The upper overtones of that A actually have E in it, so they're causing the A string to vibrate at its resonant frequency. One thing I should make a note of is that just because two things resonate together is not necessarily a good thing. Now that we've made that point, let's talk about strings a little bit. In string theory, it is posited that a fundamental string might vibrate in as many as 26 dimensions, and I rarely hear it discussed that fundamental particles vibrate in anything less than 11 dimensions. But for us here living in kind of the normal world that we see, you can think of a regular string as being concerned with thickness, length, and tension primarily in determining what frequency it resonates at a fundamental level, or what we call its fundamental frequency. So basically what that means, if you have a thicker string, the string is going to want to vibrate lower generally. If the string is longer, it's going to want to vibrate lower. If it is shorter, it's going to be higher. And if the string is tenser, the frequency is also going to be higher. And you can change all these things as much as you want to change the resonant frequencies of the string. But read into this. That means that there is no such thing as a universal frequency for anything. If you take your guitar and you tune the A string so it'll resonate with 440, it'll resonate at 440. If you tune it down a couple of notches, it'll resonate at 432. If you turn it a few more notches, it's going to resonate at 427, but not 440. Just because you have a 432 something resonating doesn't mean everything else in existence is going to resonate with it better or worse, which is what some people claim.
It doesn't vibrate good.
And if you look at that picture there, where you have like the water that's vibrating really nicely with 432 and the water that's not vibrating with 440, well, that doesn't mean that water vibrates better with 432 than with 440. That's ridiculous. Basically, if you change the dimensions of that chamber that it was in, you'd probably get a nicer interference pattern. And you could say that with just about anything. It's the same if you look at the Cymatics experiment that I've got linked down here. Basically, what you're seeing is that, I mean, personally, when I look at that, I don't see like a huge difference between a lot of the 432 and the 440 ones. But you should also note that this person is more than a little biased towards 432. 432 is in their channel title, and they are spending 30% and 300% longer on the 432 tones, which gives the sand more time to coalesce, which even makes the patterns look nicer than they might with 440, which basically is more than a little bit shisty. So basically, if your BS detector isn't going off at this point, y'all gotta go get it fixed. And it's really a mistake to think that 432 is better on because of some universal quality when you don't even have a basic understanding of the physics behind it. But now that you do, that shouldn't be a problem. That doesn't mean 432 has no merit to it. The question you should really be asking is, does 432 resonate with certain very important things related to human beings? I think the easiest way to understand that is to take a second and just let's take a second and look at seconds. So vibration is generally defined in terms of what is called cycles per second, or number of times something vibrates every second on your watch. And these are called hertz, which is defined as cycles per second. But how is a second measured in the first place? Well, the definition of a second has changed greatly throughout history, but it's argued that the main idea started with the Greeks, such as Eratosthenes, Claudius Ptolemy, and Hipparchus, who were using a sexagesimal system, or a base 60 system, to basically divide the globe, and they did believe in a round Earth at that point, to divide the circle of the globe into 360 degrees and then take different parts of the day and the Earth's rotation and break it down also into 60 divisions of 60 basically, which gives us basically our hours and our seconds of the modern day, more or less. Now, of course, the exact measurement of seconds has changed from a sundial apparent time to a clock mean time to a mean solar time to something being related to the length of the day again to something related to the number of vibrations of a cesium atom to then cesium atoms at a certain altitude to get rid of gravitational time dilation. But basically, at this point, it's really hard to tell if a second in and of itself is related to anything other than something you can reproduce in a lab fairly consistently. So the idea of setting a second equal to 1 as your generating tone in your tonal system really doesn't have any significance that I'm aware of. If someone can show me how it does, I would love to know that. But as far as I can tell, it's not particularly significant except in terms of like some arbitrary division of rotations of the Earth, which has nothing to do with anything else. Now, this actually gets towards more of the heart of why a lot of folks argue for A432, which is that it actually works a little nicer mathematically. And I think this is actually a legitimate argument, aside from the fact that a second doesn't actually tell you anything about why it's nice or why it matters that it's nice. Rudolf Steiner, the noted anthroposophist, basically argued that we should have changed the concert pitch to C at 128 cycles per second, which actually is 2 to the 7th. It's actually in the binary series, which makes it a very, very easy number to work with. So if you argue that, we're just going to make 1 second our generating tone, you could argue that that's C, but then just multiply it by a bunch of octaves, and now you're going to get a nice C at 128, which is a pretty nice number to work with. And then if you're using just intonation, you actually would get A at 432. And what else is nice is that pretty much every other number you get, you use when you're working with a just intonation system is more or less going to be a whole number. As a guy who's done a lot of just intonation calculations myself, I can say that's a really nice thing. So that's actually a fairly positive argument in favor of 432, but there's a bit of a danger there too. If you look back at Pythagoreans, they actually believed that numbers themselves would give us secrets to the universe or had some sort of spiritual quality to them. And I'm not saying there's nothing special about numbers at all, but the idea that they're going to give you some kind of insight into why the music sounds the way it does in and of themselves is a bit of a mistake. This is something I researched a lot when I was in college. I discovered that if you look at like pure just intervals, which have these very kind of nice small whole number frequency ratios, they look very nice on paper and they seem to have a very elegant quality to them, which they certainly do. But if you take the equally tempered pitches, which most people are tolerant of at the very least, the ratios used to calculate them are ridiculous, arbitrary, irrational numbers, which should tell you that if it's, if the quality of the notes related to the number, they should sound terrible. But they don't. They actually sound bad in proportion to how far they are from the harmonic series from which they're derived. As Barbosa would say, it's more of a guideline than an actual rule. So it's important to realize that the math is a tool, but you shouldn't create an arbitrary division between what it tells you and what everything else is telling you, including your own ears. So here's the thing you really got to consider fairly seriously is what are the practical effects of changing to A432? You got to realize that your body is going to absorb frequencies as well as your ears, and they're both going to be impacted. And we just know, bodies just eat up sound, but the sound doesn't just disappear. It gets dissipated in the body somehow. We know from watching the percussionist Evelyn Glennie, she can actually hear pitches fairly accurate, even though she's totally deaf, and she does it through feeling the resonance in her bones, and she's trained herself to do this. So you can have frequencies resonate directly with your body and with your ears and with your brain and have all these great effects. And who knows, maybe 432 is significant in relation to one or the other. But what I have not been able to find is someone explaining to me in a believable way what that mechanism is. They just argue that it has this magical effect on people. But, when we describe the tests that they do, like, let's have someone listen to a 440, 432, it's basically like going up to someone and shaking their hand really, really tight until it hurts, and then loosening your handshake a little bit and saying, which one do you like better? You're setting a standard and then changing it and then have people relate to that. It's like, that's a really bad test. And that's about the worst test I've seen. Then there's some that are a little better, but there's some really basic things that really don't get considered, like the fact that A and C, if these are the tones you think are significant to nature, aren't in 5 of the 12 major keys that are even getting used all the time, not to say of anything of any other possible scales or keys. They're not even that major of notes in most of the other keys. And there's no consideration to how the notes get used in the style of music you're talking about, or how you should look at that to have a specific effect on people. So basically the idea that like setting your generating tone to a particular number and having no consideration for everything else, I mean, I gotta be honest, that's pretty crassly ignorant, and that really shows a serious disregard for consideration of what's really going on in music, and it basically makes me not trust the idea at all. But just because certain people don't make a very compelling argument for 432 as the pitch standard doesn't mean it's a bad pitch standard. And in the next episode, I'm actually going to make some arguments for it, or I'm going to try to do some tests that I think would show it one way or another in a way that I would believe. So that's one thing we'll get into, but the last thing I want to talk about is what I think is actually a conspiracy that's actually way more serious than A432. With all this talk about whether the fundamental frequency we're tuning to fits with nature, there's very little consideration given by even a lot of people in the 432 camp to the fact that even if you tune A to 432, if you're still using equal temperament, everything you play is out of tune with the harmonic series, which is the most fundamental musical phenomenon in nature. And there are both psychoacoustic and cultural implications to the kind of hegemonic presence of equal temperament in every kind of music all over the world right now. So one thing I'm really going to look into next time are the effects of the spread of Western music and, both the cultural and the psychoacoustics effects of it related specifically to tuning and temperament, but also some other aspects of culture. And I'm going to weigh those against the importance of the 432 conspiracy and compare, okay, which one of these do I think we should really be focusing on? Thanks for hanging out. If you liked this video, hit the like button. If you didn't like it, hit the dislike button. I'll cry all the way to the bank. And yeah, if you like this stuff, subscribe to the channel. Come check out the next video. Leave things in the comments if you want to have more of a discussion on this. I'm trying to have an open discussion about it rather than just kind of be in an echo chamber. So feel free to challenge me on any of these points. I'd be happy to go deeper into it. And yeah, hope to see you all soon. Catch you later.